Picture this. You walk into a used car dealership in 2021 with £15,000, ready to buy a 3-year-old family car. The salesman shows you a 2018 Ford Focus with 40,000 miles. You check online, this exact car sold new in 2018 for £18,000. 3 years of depreciation should have knocked off at least £6,000, maybe more. You're expecting to pay around £11,000, maybe £12,000. The salesman smiles and says, "That'll be £19,500. You laugh.
He's joking, right?
Except it's not. Tato set cart, 3 years old, with 40,000 miles of wear cost, more than it did brand new. You look around the laddery. Car is the same story. Used cars, costing more than their original sticker price. The entire foundation of automotive economics has turned upside down. Meet David, a teacher from Leeds. In March 2020, he sold his 2017 Honda Civic for £13,000 to help with finances during the pandemic. Sensibly move. He was working from home, didn't need a car, and £13,000 helped cushion the uncertainty. He figured he'd buy another car in a year when things normalized. Probably for £10,000 or less, since used car prices always drop during recessions. Fast forward to 2021. David starts shopping for the same model Civic he sold. Same year, similar mileage. The price, £17,500. David sold his car for £13,000 and now has to pay £17,500 to buy the same car back. He'd lost £4,500 by making what seemed like a rational economic decision. And he's not alone. Millions of people experience this exact nightmare. So, what happened? How did used cars vehicles, that by definition have depreciated, become more expensive than new ones? How did the entire used car market break every rule of economics and flip completely backwards? Today, we're going to expose the perfect storm that turned used cars into appreciation assets, and why this wasn't just a weird pandemic glitch, but a systematic restructuring of the entire automotive market. Let's start with a fundamental principle that governed car buying for decades. Depreciation. Everyone knows cars lose value the moment you drive them off the lot. Industry standard was that a new car loses 20% of its value in the first year, then roughly 15% per year for the next 4 years. So, a £20,000 car becomes £16,000 after year 1, £13,600 after year 2, £11,500 after year 3. This was predictable, reliable, mathematical. You could calculate exactly what any used car should cost based on its age and mileage. Depreciation was the one constant in automotive economics. Then 2020 happened, and depreciation stopped. 10 Rivers then went completely insane. By mid-2021, Autotrader UK reported something unprecedented. 68% of used cars were selling for more than their calculated depreciated value. Not just slightly more, massively more. Cars that should have been worth £12,000 were fetching £16,000. Some models were selling for more than their original MSRP 3 or 4 years earlier. A 2019 Toyota RAV4 that sold new for £28,000 was trading at £32,000 in 2021, had appreciated by £4,000 while being driven 30,000 miles. This defied every law of automotive economics. The numbers were staggering. According to Cox Automotive, the average used car price in America jumped from $20,400 in January 2020 to $29,200 by May 2022. That's a 43% increase in just over 2 years. In Britain, the Society of Motor Manufacturers and Traders reported that average used car prices rose from £13,500 in early 2022, £18,900. By late 2021, 40% surge. These weren't luxury cars or rare collectibles. These were ordinary family sedans, hatchbacks, SUVs. The entire market had gone mad. But here's where it gets truly bizarre. During the same period, new car prices also increased, but not as dramatically. New car prices in the UK rose about 12 to 15% from 2020 to 2021. Used car prices rose 40%. This created an economic impossibility. A 3-year-old car with 40,000 miles cost more than a brand new one with 0 miles. Dealerships were reporting customers who'd bought new cars 2 years earlier, trading them in for more than they'd paid. People were accidentally making profit on their daily drivers. It was financial madness. AutoTrader published a case study in August 2021 that perfectly illustrated the insanity. A customer had purchased a new Volkswagen Golf in 2019 for £24,000. He'd driven it for 2 years, put 25,000 miles on it. Normal depreciation meant it should be worth £16,000 to £17,000. He decided to sell. The offers he got, £26,500. He'd made a £2,500 profit on a car he'd been using daily for 2 years. The buyer, who paid £26,500, felt like he got a deal because new Golfs, if you could even find one, were selling for £29,000 and had a 9-month waiting list. So what caused this? How did something this economically backwards happen? The answer is a perfect storm of supply chain collapse, manufacturing constraints, semiconductor shortages, and perhaps most importantly, deliberate production restrictions that created artificial scarcity. Let's break down exactly how the used car market exploded. First, the new car market collapsed. When COVID hit in March 2020, automotive factories shut down globally. Production plummeted. By April 2020, global car production had fallen by 40% compared to April 2019. Dealerships that normally had 200 or 300 new cars sitting on their lots suddenly had 20. Then 10. Then none. Customers who wanted new cars couldn't get them. Wait times stretched from weeks to months. If you wanted a specific model and a specific color with specific features, you might wait a year, maybe longer. This is when the first domino fell. People who needed cars immediately started shopping used. That's normal during new car shortages. What wasn't normal was the scale. Millions of people simultaneously shifted from new car shopping to used car shopping. Demand for used cars skyrocketed. But here's the problem. You can't just manufacture more used cars. Supply is fixed. There are only as many 3-year-old cars as were sold 3 years ago. Supply is completely inelastic. Then came the semiconductor crisis, which made everything exponentially worse. Modern cars aren't mechanical anymore, they're computers with wheels. A typical family car contains over 1,400 semiconductor chips, managing everything from engine control to entertainment systems to safety features. When semiconductor production fell in 2020 and early 2021, automotive manufacturing ground to a halt. Not slowed down, completely stopped in many cases. IHS Markit estimated that the global semiconductor shortage caused 11.3 million fewer vehicles to be produced in 2021 alone. That's 11.3 million new cars that should have entered the market but didn't. In 2022, another 4 million vehicles lost to chip shortages. Over 2 years, 15 million new cars vanished from global supply. To put that in perspective, that's more than the entire annual car market of Europe. Those cars didn't exist, couldn't be built, weren't available for purchase, but people still needed transportation. COVID actually increased car demand because people didn't want public transport during a pandemic. Remote work meant people could live further from city centers. Stimulus checks and pandemic savings gave people money to spend, so demand increased while supply fell through the floor. This is Economics 101. When demand exceeds supply by massive margins, prices explode. And they did. Manheim Market Report, which tracks used car auction prices in America, showed wholesale used car values increased by 42% from January 2022. These are auction prices, what dealers pay for inventory before adding their markup. If wholesale jumped 42%, retail prices jumped even more. Dealers were paying record prices to acquire inventory, then adding normal margins, resulting in used cars that cost more than comparable new cars did a few years earlier. But there's a deeper, more sinister element to this story that most people miss. Automotive manufacturers could have prevented this. They could have ramped up production aggressively to meet demand. They could have prioritized semiconductor allocation to produce more affordable cars. They didn't. In fact, evidence suggests they deliberately kept production constrained because scarcity was wildly profitable. General Motors' internal documents, later disclosed in investor filings, revealed that the company was earning record profit per vehicle during 2021 to 2022, despite producing fewer cars. How? Because with demand far exceeding supply, they could charge whatever they wanted. They eliminated discounts, rebates, promotional financing. They prioritized production of high-margin trucks and SUVs. over affordable sedans. They discovered that selling fewer cars at much higher prices was more profitable than their old business model of selling volume at competitive prices. Ford's CEO Jim Farley admitted in a 2021 investor call that the company was taking a more disciplined approach to inventory and production. Translation: we're keeping supply tight to maintain high prices. Stellantis reported similar strategies. Toyota, typically conservative, announced production cuts even after semiconductor supplies began recovering. Across the industry, manufacturers coordinated on the same strategy. Keep production below demand, keep inventory low, keep prices high. This had a direct impact on the used car market. Normally, a steady stream of new cars becomes used cars over time, maintaining healthy used car supply. But with new car production down 15 to 20% for multiple years, the pipeline of future used cars dried up. In 2024, we're dealing with the consequences of those production cuts. There are simply fewer 2 to 3-year-old used cars available because fewer new cars were sold in 2021 to 2022. Supply remains constrained, keeping prices elevated. Then there's the rental car factor, which most people don't realize was huge. Enterprise, Eretz, Abyss, the major rental companies typically buy 1.5 to 2 million new cars annually in the US alone. These fleets turn over every 12 to 18 months, flooding the used market with low-mileage, well-maintained vehicles at predictable prices. Rental fleet cars were a major source of affordable used car inventory. During COVID, rental companies nearly went bankrupt. Hertz literally filed for bankruptcy in May 2020. To survive, they sold off massive portions of their fleets. In 2022, 2021, rental companies sold approximately 770,000 vehicles they normally would have kept. This provided temporary relief to used car supply. But then, when travel recovered in 2021, rental companies needed to rebuild their fleets. Suddenly, instead of selling 1.5 million cars into the used market annually, they were bujin 2 million cars out of the used market. They flipped from suppliers to competitors, removing another massive chunk of used car supply while simultaneously increasing demand. Cargo's data showed that in 2022, rental car companies purchased 31% of all used cars sold at auction day were literally buying used cars to rebuild rental fleets because they couldn't get enough new cars. This was unprecedented. Rental companies competing with regular consumers for used cars drove prices even higher. The used car financing explosion made things worse. When used cars hit £20,000 to $25,000, most people couldn't pay cash. So they financed, and banks, seeing rising values, were happy to lend. Average used car loan amounts in the UK rose from £11,000 in 2019 to £16,500 by 2022. Loan terms stretched from 4 years to 6 years. Interest rates ranged from 7 to 14%, depending on credit. This allowed people to afford the inflated prices through debt, which sustained demand and kept prices high. But here's the really disturbing part. The industry realized consumers would absorb these prices. In 2020, everyone thought used car prices would crash. In 2021, analysts said it was temporary. In 2022, they predicted correction. But by 2023, automotive executives and dealers admitted the truth. Prices would never fully return to pre-COVID levels. Why? Because consumers had been trained to accept the new normal. Psychological anchoring happened. When people saw used cars at £20,000, then prices dropped to £17,000. They felt like they were getting a deal. They didn't realize that same car cost £12,000 in 2019. The anchor point had shifted. Dealers could maintain prices 30 to 40% above historical norms, and customers accepted it because they were comparing to peak pandemic prices, not pre-pandemic prices. The electric vehicle transition provided cover for sustained high prices. Manufacturers started pushing the narrative that all cars were getting more expensive because of electrification, technology, safety features. This was partially true. Modern cars do have more technology, but it didn't justify the scale of price increases. Analysis from automotive economists found that technology and regulatory compliance added approximately 8 to 12% to vehicle costs from 2019 to 2023. Prices increased 40 to 50%. The gap was pure profit-taking. Meanwhile, Depreciation curves changed permanently. Pre-COVID, you could expect 50 to 60% depreciation over 5 years. Post-COVID, that's dropped to 30 to 35%. A car that should be worth £10,000 after 5 years is now worth £13,000 to £14,000. Seems good for sellers, but it's terrible for buyers. The used car market traditionally, where budget-conscious buyers found affordable transportation, has become expensive. The escape valve for people who can't afford new cars has been eliminated. The impact on working-class families has been devastating. Low-income families typically buy older used cars in the £3,000, £6,000 range. These vehicles used to be 8 to 12 years old, with higher mileage, but mechanically sound. That market has been obliterated. Cars that cost £4,000 in 2019 now cost £7,000 to £8,000. For families living paycheck to paycheck, that difference is insurmountable. Many have been forced into predatory pay here dealerships charging 20 to 30% interest, creating debt traps. The RAC Foundation found that in 2024, 37% of UK households cannot afford to replace their current vehicle with an equivalent model at current prices. That's over 10 million households trapped in their existing cars, unable to upgrade, forced to keep repairing aging vehicles. This creates safety issues. Older cars lack modern safety features and environmental issues. As older cars pollute more, young people have been particularly destroyed by this market. First-time car buyers traditionally bought cheap used cars, gaining independence and mobility. The average first car in 2015 cost around £2,500. By 2024, that's jumped to £6,000 to £7,000 for anything remotely reliable, on entry-level salaries of £20,000 to £24,000. This represents 3 months of gross income just for a basic car. Add insurance, which is astronomical for young drivers, and car ownership becomes impossible for many. So where does this end? The brutal truth is that it doesn't. Used car prices have declined from their 2022 peak. That 3-year Focus that cost £19,500 in 2021 might be £17,000 now. But they've stabilized at levels still 35 to 40% above pre-industry analysts universally agree. Prices won't return to 2019 levels. The automotive market has been permanently restructured. Manufacturers love this because expensive used cars make new cars look more reasonable. If a 3-year-old car costs £22,000, suddenly at £28,000, new one seems worth the premium. It's relative value manipulation. Dealers love it because they make more profit per transaction. Financial institutions love it because larger loans mean more interest income. The only losers are consumers who've seen basic transportation transform from an affordable necessity into a major financial burden. Government response has been non-existent. You'd think competition authorities would investigate why the entire automotive industry simultaneously restricted production and eliminated affordable options. You'd think consumer protection agencies would examine predatory financing practices. You'd think someone would question why basic transportation has become unaffordable for millions. But no major investigations have happened. Regulators accepted industry explanations of supply chain issues without examining whether production restrictions were strategic rather than necessary. The used car market breaking economic law and used cars costing more than new ones should have triggered alarm bells. It should have prompted intervention. Instead, it was treated as a temporary anomaly that it didn't self-correct because it was never a natural market dysfunction. It was a coordinated industry response to restructure pricing permanently. David, that teacher from Leeds who sold his Civic for £13,000 and had to buy it back for £17,500. He finally got back into a car in 2023. He paid £16,000 for a 2018 Civic with 55,000 miles more than he sold his better car for 3 years earlier. He's locked into a 5-year loan at 8.9% interest. His monthly payment is £310. That's £18,600 total for a used car. Nearly £20,000 for a 5-year-old vehicle. And he's grateful because at least he has transportation. That's where we are. Grateful to pay £20,000 for used cars. The automotive industry used COVID to permanently reset consumer expectations. They proved that people will pay whatever is asked, because cars aren't optional in modern society. They're essential for work, for family, for life. And when something is essential, you can charge anything. The industry learned this lesson, and they're never unlearning it. Used cars became more expensive than new ones because the entire automotive market was deliberately restructured during a crisis. Production was restricted. Inventory was constrained. Prices were inflated. And once consumers accepted the new prices, there was no going back. This wasn't a market failure. This was the market working exactly as corporations designed it, extracting maximum profit from captive consumers who have no alternative. The used car market broke because someone wanted it broken, and now we're all paying the price.